Welcome to episode 110 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast. Nick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and in this one, it was a weird round. Unlike last week where there were so many close games, this week only had like two close games and a bunch of like weird score margins. But it was just another week in the bye rounds, so it's always going to be a little bit weird. But let's jump straight into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
Not bad, not too bad. I mean, cool. A 1 point margin, a 3 point margin, and an 8 point margin. I can't really complain with that. It's just not exactly the games we sort of expected
No, that's true.
to be interesting contests, but it is what it is. I'm not doing too badly. Yeah, it was a pretty chill week for me. Sort of been organising a few things, sort of looking for jobs and oh yeah, a lot of other random stuff. But yeah, had a bit of quiet on over the weekend. Just that Saturday chilling. Saw both my grandparents,
Nice.
well, both my mum and dad's side during the day, which was nice because, as I said, it's always nice to visit granddad. This is pretty boring in the nursing home, so I always like to when I can. And mum's side of the family's doing well, so yeah, just a pretty chill and nice week for myself. How about
Very,
you?
very good. Very love to hear that. Not too busy for me. It's still mostly work and all of that. I ended up going into the city yesterday, initially to watch the Richmond Brisbane game. Even though that was played in Hobart, I wanted to go out to a place and actually watch it. Completely forgetting that the World Cup was on, so the city was in total
Yeah,
chaos because of Australia playing it that
yeah,
day. Um, so we
and
ended
a
up
good
kind
win
of,
too.
yeah, 2-0 against Turkey. Like phenomenal defensive game, honestly. Because
Yeah,
I ended up watching the soccer and having the footy on my phone. So it was like idly watching both. And it was good. It was a good time all around. But
yeah.
yeah,
I heard that.
same on same all otherwise.
Yeah, I heard the Socceroos were they didn't win possession, but as I said, they just kept holding on, and then I think it was one goal relatively early and one goal late, something like that.
Yeah, that's about
I
right.
I was out at the time, so yeah, no, so it was really good to see. As I said, means fingers crossed. You have a chance of advancing in the group. Just really depends on how we go against USA, I suppose. I think the other one, Paraguay, in our group, we're actually above in world standings, which
Yeah,
is
I
pretty.
believe our group consists of us, Turkey, the USA, and Paraguay. So it's
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so as I said, it would be nice to advance because we're not exactly a powerhouse in this World Cup. So any decent results we'll be fairly happy with a fairly young team. And
yeah,
yeah, fingers
yeah, I
crossed.
completely agree. But that will now, not that that had anything to do with the AFL, but we are going to segment
No,
our way into the AFL and the games have just come and gone. Starting off with the big Thursday night clash over at Marvel Stadium with the Western Bulldogs and the Adelaide Crows, and with a 57-point margin, the Crows won out 19-7, 121 to 9-10, 64.
yes, and this game, probably you'll know, it was led by an absolutely electric quarter by super captain Jordan Dawson. Man, how good has he been since his return? Set up the Crows for an emphatic bullying of the Bulldogs. The Dogs were denied a lot of marks inside 50 from a stout Adelaide defence.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the Dogs sort of struggling at the moment. We know they're not going to get I was about to say Sean Darcy, Sam Darcy, back this year, and while I do think that Aaron Norton is still doing his jobs, yeah, they're really struggling to get a bit of consistency there. Um, but a peatling tag as well caused a really sorry uh, a peatling tag caused 10 of 28 of Ed Richards' possessions to be clangers,
Ooh.
whilst Dawson only had 4 from turnovers from 32 contested, with 17, 32 possessions, 17 contested. What I'm trying to say is that Adelaide's midfield was a bit classy. Sam Berry, who I think I talked to in the group chat, I think his hard work and scrap has sort of allowed players like Dawson uh, to rise to the top. Because, as I said, we've always said they needed a Rankin to be a bit of a disposal X factor.
Mm-hmm.
But Berry's hard work has freed up Dawson a fair bit, and I think his game's actually lifted from the last 2 years. And I think there's been times where Dawson's been near All Australian, and I've been like, oh, his disposals a bit lacking, and I always find it hard because you don't want to be too harsh on players, and sometimes you wonder if you're being pedantic or not. But watching him play this season, like this is where his best football is lying, in my opinion. I think it's the best form he's been in his career.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, a lot of the Crows it's in really, really good form, surprisingly. And like considering only a couple of weeks ago, they didn't even look like they were going to get back to their best, like they were over the past couple of
Yeah.
seasons where they've been, hitting that finals kind of stride. But like, got Berry, Rankin, the fact that McAndrews has come into the league and absolutely trounced a bunch of the league's best ruckmen, like, is so impressive. James Peatling, I've been a fan of him since he was at the Giants, and now he's just continuing to prove like his worth so much, so like by far and away, a huge amount of value for that midfield core. And then you've got the Adelaide backline. Again, we've talked about the Adelaide backline at length and how like we thought they wouldn't exactly function without Keane early on. They figured out that issue, and even going into this game, we thought there might have been a little bit of a hole without Jordan Butts being out. But they managed to patch it up really well and absolutely dominate the Bulldogs.
Yeah, well, this is, I guess, a point where I'll probably bring up James Borlase. Like, he's been pretty solid this year. He's played 8 games, but he's never been the standout. But this game, uh, boy, did he look good. I think he ended up with. Oh, that's the stat I want to highlight. So he took nine intercepts and was pretty good with ball in hand. Towed
Mm-hmm.
up Lewis, and his ball contested one-on-one wins were more than the Dogs had marks inside 50. I think the Dogs only had 3 marks inside 50 for the entire night. So they were really struggling there. But yeah, as I said, I think the thing is the Crows have always had defensive shape. But I think their ball movement just got a bit stagnant for a while.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, a lot of talk has been on Wayne Milera, how good he's been this year, and I don't want to take that away from him. He's been fantastic, but as I said, like as good as he is, it's sort of made it one-dimensional coming in from the back line. But we've even seen players like Nick Murray take a bit more of uh, a kicking duty. I mean,
Yeah.
this game he had 512 meters gains. I think there's a fair few games where he's at least hit 400. So as I said, he gets a bit of meterage for how deep he plays. But yeah, as I said, they're just not always that connection with the outside midfield unit. That's even something that they'll still be working on. But yeah, as this season's going on, their strengths are getting a bit back to peak, and
Mm-hmm.
making this movement issue not as big a factor. Especially since their forward line, they're starting to create a tiny bit. Obviously, Riley Philthorpe gets 3 goals. Lightly had the lobster. Sometimes had O'Donnell. Rochelle also absolutely fantastic. He had a really nice run of form as well. So yeah, no, as I said, that was all really good. And as you mentioned before, Macca Andrews absolutely gave English a bath. And as I said, the only other thing I will say is this is another game where high pressure really sunk the Dogs' ball use. And as I said, while I do think they're gaining back some form, and I don't think this is like the biggest step back. I'm not going to say, oh, the Dogs can't make finals off the back of this, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just I think it's just where teams are going to be looking to expose the Dogs before they get their full run of players back, and that's just pressure. It's all but clear that when you put a bit of pressure on them, a lot of their stats has gone worse, and we did see that last year. Like against a lot of the good teams, the Dogs sort of didn't really have as much differential uh, gains as they did along the top half. Again, I think that's improved since their back half movement's gotten a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Not much of that for this game, obviously.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I said, it would just sort of yeah, a bit of a dour one for the Dogs, really.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a little bit of a step down. Especially after their form has been fairly decent over the past couple of weeks. But Adelaide are just in such a better position. And even though their forward line is isn't exactly 100% because of Tex, coming in, going out, coming in, going out. Part of it from injury, part of it from suspension. Um, but it's just
Too
like
missing, yeah.
they've been able to make it work. Like because having Thilthorpe back makes a huge difference for them as their number one forward. And it's just just the way that midfield unit works is starting to be probably one of the midfielders that probably lines up into becoming one of the top three. Uh,
Yeah,
it's
maybe not top
I think
three,
it's
but
sort of
I
like in the
definitely
mix,
think,
maybe more so like top five, but it's definitely like in the mix
yeah,
of like
I
some of
think
the
it's as a
best.
balance of inside and outside, and I think forward half is where this has sort of come this year because they were a really good back half team last year, and that sort of dropped off. And I mentioned this numerous time, but in the forward half when they do get it in there, players like Zach Taylor have been fantastic. Braden Cook has been involved in goal scoring. Even Dan Curtin sometimes pinches a few goals in there, and then as I said, when you have your forward line struggling as it is a tiny bit. They're not seeing a huge drop off in points. I mean, there's been a few teams that have really restricted their movements in the struggle. But
Yeah,
I mean, against the better teams, they've been fairly close in most matchups. They've only been losing games by very small margins. So yeah, as I said, I think this is. I personally think the Crows are a top four side.
that's
I thought that before this game. Um, I was surprised how many people tipped the Dogs, but I wasn't that surprised they were favourites.
I
But yeah,
this was the only tip that I missed this week.
yeah.
And
Well,
like
you and I were upset. So I missed you missed the first, I missed the last. So
I went with the Dogs mostly because I feel like they had shown me a little bit more promise just over the past couple of weeks, whereas I felt like Adelaide was still not 100% in finding their feet. Or not necessarily not finding their feet, but
jump
like
off last week. Oh man,
it was a close game, but it was I mean they were still hot, yeah.
yeah. No,
But also it being at Marvel as well, and I'm pretty sure the Crows don't have a
yeah.
great track record at
Oh no, I'm
Marvel.
not saying
So
like tipping. And I'm not saying tipping the Dogs was a dumb decision, but yeah, I was just a bit surprised because it's like, well, there's still got a lot of holes in their list, and we saw Luke Kennedy make his debut. Again, I didn't really because I only watched highlights and
I
a few bits and pieces. But he bobbed up here and there, and you know, like 10 possessions, 3 tackles. Not too bad, but yeah, as I said, yeah, it just looked a bit rough. There was a fair few Bulldogs players that just didn't quite get the contribution. Like Will Lewis, I think has really hit a wall. I think that they will be looking to maybe don't know, just reorganize, maybe go a bit smaller in the forward line. I know they haven't operated like that for a while, but they do have some really good ground level players. We know Sanders, Riley West
mm-hmm.
can operate really well on ground level.
Artie
So they could
Jones.
reshape. Yeah, Artie Jones, he's like that medium sized forward where, he can be that forward target, but he also operates on ground level as well.
Mm.
So, it's hard to tell because it's a bit easier to say, oh, after this game, you need to really change things up. But I do think long term, it's just expecting a lot for players like Lewis and Croft to last the rest of the season plus finals if they do make that push in September.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be a tough ask for especially for the
Yeah,
younger forwards. So yeah, maybe a slight pivot to having a smaller forward line and play a little bit more ground ball might be in their favor. But that's just
mm,
it'll have to be just a wait and see kind of idea. On the injury
yeah,
side of things, Luke Pedler went out with a hamstring injury, and on the MRO side of things, Artie Jones was fined $2,000 for rough conduct against Josh Worrell, and Josh Rochelle was fined $1,000 for striking Michael Selwood. And that
yeah.
brings us now.
There's one thing I do want to say,
Mm-hmm.
just quickly, just about Jordan Dawson's game, because I forgot this until I saw it just then. His first quarter player rating for Champion Data, 20.6. The next highest, that's for the first quarter, I should say.
Okay.
His total was 30.6. The next highest player for the entire match got 20.2. So Jordan Dawson in the first quarter was more higher rated than everyone's entire game, which is pretty neat. I don't know if that's ever happened before. And look, as I said, it's champion data metric of 0.4. It doesn't really mean much, but
True.
yeah, that was a very emphatic first quarter.
It's true. Yeah, from what I saw of the highlights of his game, like he was an absolute monster. Like fantastic performance all
No,
around. All right.
yeah,
Let's jump over now to our Friday night clash between Geelong and the Gold Coast Suns over in Geelong, the big quote-unquote whiteout game, as Geelong have dubbed it, and with a 45-point margin, the Cats do win out 15-15, 105 to 8-12, 60.
I don't really get it, to be honest. I mean, I guess it's nice as like a little trend, but
Yeah, I don't
yeah, for me, it's
understand
just
it either. Don't worry.
still more but talking about whiteout, there was a massive whiteout for the Suns, unfortunately. It was an absolute trouncing after quarter times. The Suns gave up contest and territory all night to the Cats. Suns were very high possession, very low impact, especially with their midfielders, and they gave up a lot of defensive efforts. Yeah, and especially in that midfield group. Um, and the Suns' defense was sort of left chasing from it. You know, as I said, they've been struggling all year to defend off some pretty poor stoppage work, and yeah, they got a bit exposed again. Despite some of the score tallies, the Cats' set shots were actually very brilliant for the night. They just didn't really quite get it right at ground level, but it didn't really matter because the Suns' back up movement really wasn't that effective.
Yep.
So you know, it was just the ball for the majority of time just spent in forwards. Geelong's forward half.
Mm-hmm.
Pace did dictate a lot of Geelong's movement, and it was very different to see the burst from Holmes and Smith, complementing the great inside works of Axons, Blitzarves, and Manor. And we just really didn't see it from the Suns. They looked slow. They were looking to possess the ball, and they were just like kicking that, like they were unsure of their next possession. Really,
Yeah.
you know, it's been a bit of an issue, you know, for the Suns, and you know they've been getting away with it against, you know, lower on the ladder teams, but yeah, as I said, against Geelong, they were just fruit for the sideboard. Ben King, fantastic season still. I think it's been pretty great, and it's just lost those around him at the ground level. And to say like Long has been streaky this season is very forgiving for Ben Long,
Mm-hmm.
and Humphreys ice cold in the last few contests. Like there, I know, you know, as I said, players like Walters and all that, you know, sort of get the you know, the ire of Suns fans, but at least with Jed Walters, you know, he's providing shape in the contest and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, you know, I've never seen Long look so uninfluential in a game, in some of the games that I've seen this year. And as I said, Bailey Humphreys are pretty much in the same boat. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a concern because yeah, their scoring's really dropped off. You know, again, no multiple goal kickers again in this game apart from Ben King.
Yep.
You know, and they just, you know, they're sort of relying on their midfielders to kick goals, and they weren't ever put in position to do that. So it's very hard to see where their scoring's going to come from for the next few weeks unless something change. Um,
Yeah. It's
I've
a little
yeah,
concerning for sure. Like yeah, and a part of that I think also has to do with that midfield rotation that we keep kind of complaining about because it just hasn't been working either. So it's
yeah.
very interesting to see kind of what's going to happen in terms of the shape of their midfield and how that influences um like their inside the how clean their inside 50s can be and whether that ends up converting at all.
Yeah, because it's like, you know, obviously they just had an Moyle today, and I still think he did a pretty reasonable job, all things considered. But you know, this is the most consistent their midfield has been. Obviously they've had a few players come in and out, but they're mainly, you know, they're fringe players anyway. Alex Davis, Will Powell.
Mm-hmm.
I think Powell probably being the biggest one for the short-term future. I think he's still missing a couple of games by memory. And yeah, as I said. But you know, as I said, it's just been yeah, so ordinary. When you're talking about players like Petrarca, Rowell, and Anderson, you know, as they're getting pretty comprehensively. Well, I don't think they got beat. Well, actually, I think they did lose the clearance battle this game, but it was more just the the possessions out of clearances that were pretty, yeah. Well, even the clearances, it was 40-29. You know, so even that was still a big win. Senate clearances were a bit more even, 12-11.
Okay,
Um,
that's not too bad.
yeah, so yeah, but score from stoppage 1-3 for the Suns.
Yeah,
You know,
that's the not pretty part. That's kind of horrible.
no, and that's an area where they do have to get it because again, they're not really getting it from their tall forwards apart from King. You know, they don't really have the forward set up to, you know, not have a few extra avenues to goals. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a major concern. And as I was gonna say too, 5 ground ball shots. Sorry, not ground ball, general play shots. For 2 points for the Gold Coast Suns. You know, that just shows, like, you know, that was Carlton last year levels of bad. And yeah, Geelong defense were laughing. O'Sullivan, I thought, had a really influential game. He was manned up on the King. I think like the King's 3 goals were sort of from hard work. I don't think O'Sullivan really had a foot step back. But you know, as I said, when they're so King targeted and King's one of the best forwards in the game,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to get a few goals. So yeah, Geelong halted. I mean, he scared with this. You know, a couple of losses. One close loss against the Crows, as we talked about, and one
Mm-hmm.
against Carlton. But you know, as I said, um, you know, both of those games. You know, Geelong. I read into the sword and Nell. I have no idea. Like, I know Nell is like a siren before death or something. I can't quite remember.
I
But
mean, like
anyway,
maybe.
intense pressure.
I was gonna
Like,
say like maybe you mean like knelt. But that doesn't
yeah,
entirely
actually, I
make
think
sense
that's
when
what
they're
I
the
meant.
ones on the offense.
No, that's what I said. Like the last 2 games, like you know where they lost.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They
yeah, that
they were
makes more
sort of
sense. Yeah,
forced to kneel with an intense pressure. I think that's what I actually mean.
that makes total sense
But
now.
yeah, but this week a very lackluster Gold Coast. With the most intensity coming from Dimmer in the coaching box, giving the umpires a spray,
Yep, Dimmer is
which
back at it.
a mini talking point out of this week. Um,
I mean,
the
we've all
Suns of the
we've all
AFL
talked time and
Academy.
again about the issues of the umpiring. You know, the coaches aren't allowed to say anything because they will get fined for it. Um, but yeah, he's not wrong, and that's like the issue of it is that it's mostly it's not well in what he was
Yeah,
specifically talking about. Probably a little bit wrong, but in
yeah,
terms of like the generalization of like the inconsistency of umpiring is
yeah.
fairly on the money. Is fairly on the money.
Yeah, I think it's got a bit dangerous territory saying it was reacting from a noise of affirmation, though, from the crowd. Because, I mean, I do think home crowd bias exists. Like, I've seen the Eagles when they're up going. There's definitely a noise of affirmation thing. But to say that out of this game, even, like, I know there was, like, a few weirder decisions, but I never really felt like they went either way all that badly. And you always got to remember, like, I mean, Geelong, Geelong were first to the contest most of the times. They were, you know, often just a better team. So, you know, it was, I find it a bit hard to take that as like one of the main focal points from that, you know,
Yeah,
post game pressure. Because as I said, the Gold Coast have been pretty garbage for a month of football now. And, you know, as I said, you can talk about umpires all you want. They'll be getting a massive fine from what you're about to talk about. With Daniel Rioli being the I think it's fifth
it is fifth. You're
contact with an
correct.
umpire, which puts them into I think it was $50,000 territory
Yep,
fine
correct.
if
So,
the AFL want
well,
to enforce it.
currently, he's only been fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. It is his
Yeah,
first offense. But the club as a
yes,
whole, it's like
that's
their fifth
pretty big for the
offense,
Gold Coast.
and there's a whole kind of like review and appeal kind of thing going on where the AFL are very much considering handing down $50,000 fines to teams who continue to,
Yeah,
um, quote
and,
unquote, I guess,
yeah,
influence the umpires in a way.
yeah. And look, as I said, like whether you go, I'd have to go through the vision to see if it was all Gold Coast fault or whatever. But like, this was also the team that last year said that they weren't going to change their game style to stop quote unquote contact with the umpire. I remember Dimmer saying that last year. So, as I said, um, honestly, as I said, I look, Dimmer's stubbornness, he got Richmond a premiership from it.
Got
But
him
I
three.
do think I do think that there's a bit of I think a few assistants might need to step him aside, especially with the bye. Oh no, wait, they've already had their
They've had
bye.
that bye.
But yeah, you know what I mean. I just think there's like a little refocus that needs to be done with the Suns. It's very easy to say that from the outside, but yeah, as I said, they're just pretty bang on mediocre. And yeah, the Cats, as said, stuff a little scared. I didn't wasn't too worried about them, but as I said, it was nice to have that win be so emphatic after losing a couple of games on the trot that they
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
have liked to have dropped.
they definitely needed this win under their belts. It gets them back into one, not just like the winners list because they have been very inconsistent over the past few weeks. But just yeah, back on track in terms of just their overall performances as a team. It gives them that little bit more confidence, that kind of stuff. On the injury side of things, Jack Burrows went out before the game started with hamstring tightness, so he was a late change, and that's all she wrote for that game. So we'll now jump over to our first Saturday game at the MCG with the Demons hosting the Bombers, and with a 45-point margin, the Demons, of course, won out 13-17, 95 to 6, 14, 50.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know anything about this game. I sort of, I think I was out or something, and I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this game doesn't look like it was very interesting. But from the stats, it looked like a very tough outing for the Dons. Same Setterfield, everyone in the midfield group for Essendon got a bit of a spanking, and the D's turned that into easy possession and easy meterage.
Mm-hmm.
The most Dons could manage were some tough and wide shots as both defenses tried. Is just one team had support above the ground and the other team was Essendon. Fort Petty has found a bit of a form return. I guess, is there a return? I don't know. He's always been a very interesting forward option. But, as I said, he's got a few goals in the last few games. And Cozzy and Gauns got pretty much free coaches' votes, probably a few Brownlow votes as well. As they were just left to do what they like most of the game.
Yep.
The Dons are definitely left fractured by their injuries. They will hope that the bye, which is next week for them, or this round coming up, gives them a much needed reprieve. But I will say, going through the match and what I saw on the match report, there was a sign of fight. In the third quarter, the game was pretty much over, but they still managed to keep that to a 3-goal-to-1 advantage in their favour.
Oh, yeah.
So there was still fighting near the end, but, as I said, yeah, this is just a team that needs more experience on the park. And Melbourne just had way too many people involved in this game. There's really not much to say because, as I said, it was all Melbourne's usual offenders, I guess.
Yeah, there
Gorn,
wasn't.
Pickett had absolutely fantastic games.
Yeah, there wasn't exactly like a huge amount to kind of pull from this game. One positive, I guess you could say, for Essendon is the idea of Ben Mackay playing more forward time rather than being in the back line, and it's surprisingly given them a better, I guess, a better option in terms of a marking forward, because as everyone knows, Kyle Langford hasn't exactly been in any sort of form as a forward of late.
Yeah. Well, he played defense.
So they've thrown him in defense and thrown Mackay up forward, and it hasn't been a bad look to their credit. Plus, you're in another transition period. You've got an interim coach. You may as well try something different, and it seems
Exactly.
to be providing in some aspects. The one thing that I have an issue with though is their attempt to trial Merit off of halfback, and it's absolutely a massive gamble considering their midfield isn't exactly an S tier midfield.
Yeah, I can sort of get the idea because, man, look, Essendon, they've had a lot of turnovers so far back this year. So, again, like a lot of teams, they try putting a renowned midfielder on halfback. Port's done it with Rosie.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one. I guess Essendon's done it too, like with Andy McRae, who will be back, hopefully after the bye. So maybe this is just like a stopgap until that returns. But, I won't put it on tier as Clayton Oliver's one match off halfback against Port. I still vividly remember that. It was an abject failure, unfortunately. But, as I said, while he was involved, and it was a bit out of it last week. I think this week he sort of played decently enough, and then they just decided that they needed a bit more midfield contest because they were getting smacked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kazai Pickett and Max Gawn had 5 goals between them.
Yeah. Really, really slow games for them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few like Sullivan Roby apparently really struggled this week in the middle. You can get that with some younger players. I'm not going to knock him. He's a very talented young kid, but very young to be asking him to do full mid-time. So, so they'll need to work out some sort of rotation. And that's just where Essendon are. They need to experiment, but through experimentation, they need to find defined spots. And once they've found that, they need to then set that up for the back half of the season. Because as I said, in my mind, they still made that coaching move way too early. But, as I said, it's like, well, the decision's sort of made. You got to work out how you're going to plan the season from the rest of it, just to make sure that isn't just a big waste of time, basically.
Pretty much.
And look, as I said, I will say to Essendon's credit, they're a very trying team. Like, yeah, the defensive efforts are poor, but it's a lot to do with system. I never think that they're too often like purely just not playing for the sash, for lack of a better term.
No, yeah, like they're very much, especially the kids, like they're very much trying their hardest, but they're just getting half the time they're just getting out muscled, outmanned, outplayed in pretty much every aspect, just purely for the fact that they don't have the same kind of experience as these better, well coached teams. On the injury side of things, Lucas Cook went out with a cheekbone injury, young player for the D's. Harrison Petty also went out with a hamstring injury, and Archie Roberts with a nasty shoulder injury that will rule him out for a period of time.
Yeah, as I said, it was a pretty dour game for both sides in terms of injury. Obviously, Cook should be back, but it was a bit of a shame because he started off well enough. He was on Mackay early. He was on Harrison Jones early. Harrison Jones did unfortunately nothing. But yeah, as I said, so it was a bit of a shame because again, Melbourne are finding some new players in their back line, and he looked at least solid as a mid-season recruit, I think. But yeah, as I said, they'll just have to work out. Actually, I have no idea when their buy is, so they might have a reprieve, they might not. We'll just see where they turn up on Tuesday's injury report.
Yes. All right. Jumping over now to a big clash out in the West. A spring ball-ish, as some might say, between North Melbourne and the West Coast Eagles. And with a 1-point margin, the Roos won out at Optus, 10-14, 74 to 10-13, 73.
Yeah, this was a great escape, to be honest. Not so much from the Roos, but not so much from the Roos last quarter, I should say. But, as I said, the Roos with a loss of territory, a struggling forward line, and a hit and miss one-way midfield all night, just got bailed out by their trying defense and a bad Jake Waterman miss. Really, it was the Roos all night missing their chances. They were 6-10 from 17 shots. And don't let the scoreboard fool you. The real misses were in general play. Hitting field targets. As you say, it was very spin ball-ish. This was not both teams absolutely firing. But I do have to give the Eagles a lot of credit. Like the first game, they put real pressure on the Roos. They like the game being a bit of scrap. They back themselves in at ground ball. Whilst neither team, were four-quarter performing, the Eagles had 2 very spirited last quarters in their last 2 games. And, despite going 0-2 for them, there's a lot of good to talk about. But in terms of the general contest, I think one of the bigger matchups and something that sort of, small things in small games, small things in small margins. I think Tyler Goad, the debutant, the big debutant, 207 centimeters, really helped out Jerry. It's amazing we're talking about the fact that like Cherry needs help against one Bailey James Williams. I wouldn't have thought I would be saying that at the start of the year.
No,
But it was
definitely
true
not.
because he was the better ruckman in the first half. The Eagles looked a lot more dangerous from the clearances. Re-dominated the first quarter. Kelly taking the helm for the rest of the game. But I thought that Tyler Goad sort of, just sort of steadied the ship at times. Obviously he doesn't look like he's got the best tank going around, or he's going to be featuring on general play for too long. Sorry, for a while yet. But in terms of pure hitouts, it's about what you want for a young up and coming ruckman. I think he's 22 or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a tiny bit older. I think he was taken in the 2023 draft. Yeah, if my memories serves correct. Talking about debutants, mid-season recruit Herbert, first name Marcus.
Yes,
He
Marcus
also
Herbert.
turned on the Jets. He had a few nice highlights, breaking a few lines, and he took a few risky but fun and mostly effective moves.
Oh, yeah.
He did miss some targets here and there, but it was really nice to see another exciting player for the Eagles take the game on. In terms of North Melbourne, I think Blamires was probably one of the best ball movers. And look, in all honesty, I don't think too many North players had a good game or fantastic game, but Larky, he put on a captain's effort, and he really put on the team on the back if when needed. Like, I don't think they're winning this if Larky doesn't have a better or the sort of game that he did. Like, it wasn't like huge in terms of like I mean, it was still, what was it? I think it was only a goal in the end. 4 goals won.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Which was the same as Jack Darling. Jack Darling had a huge last quarter. Almost sunk the Eagles. Was it last? Oh, sorry. Apparently it was in quarter 2.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Anyway, I'm sort of forgetting the match. Shanahan was the one who had a last quarter.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. Anyway, what was I saying? So there's like on the stats, there's a few like super coach scorers like Sheasel, Luke Davey Uniac, Stevens. I also thought where they were like a lot of possession, not much impact, and some pretty bad defensive running. Again, Wardlaw, sort of also taking a lot of the defensive roles in that midfield. And yeah, as I said, it was good because with the tolls, because Paul Curtis, he is having a rough year. He's getting involved in disposals, but just not hitting the scoreboard. And you'll say later on, but he is looking to maybe miss the next few weeks. So they gotta use this time to figure it out, because Costanti, we all know he doesn't really hit the scoreboard. They don't have too many options in the forward line. And Dersma, he has got to be one of the most hit or miss players. Like, he either has a really solid game or next to no impact. And we know the Dersmas, they can be really exciting. But, the gap between Zane's best and worst is incredibly large.
Especially when you're comparing it to Willem. Sorry, I was trying to remember which one is at the Eagles. Yeah. Especially when you compare it to Willem, who did not play this week. Unfortunately, had an injury. Carried over from
Willem keeps his record unblemished.
Yes.
Still.
Unfortunately, had an injury carried over from last week. So we did not get to see another Dersma brother face each other. But yeah, no, like, just from what we've seen of Willem this year compared to what we've seen of Zane over the past couple of years, like, he's by far and away the better brother in terms of just overall performance and consistency on field.
High, yeah. But I do legitimately think Zane's been a lot better this week, but he has had a couple of stinkers. But, as I said, I knock some players occasionally. I don't like doing it. But look, some players I just don't rate all that highly. I do love giving a shout out when they have a good game. And Rhett Bazzo, defender of the night. Never thought I would say it. 9 intercepts, kept Trembath to 6 possessions and a goal. He was big. And, like, he was the main man back there. Like, you would have thought, like, Edwards and Gibney-less backline could produce something. Because, like, Starcevich was fine, but, like, he wasn't involved in any intercept work. That's not really his game.
No, that isn't. He's very much more of a one-on-one, a shutdown, not necessarily interceptor.
Yeah. Well, he had a bit of a struggle, but, you know, I say getting back on pack and then getting Darling, who, you know, a bit oversized for his liking. But yeah, as I said, you know, as I said, the Eagles' defense, for what it was, you know, was really not too bad. And then, yeah, was there another player? I was feeling there was. Cole still looks good in the forward line.
That's good.
I'll say that. Uh, and yeah, look, if there was, I've forgotten that. So
Yeah, that's all good.
yeah, and in terms of like, you know, the general thing, it was very topsy turvy clash, because as I said, it really felt like there was no consistent momentum. Eagles had like a bit of a run, North had a bit of a run. But you know, as I said, I still think North will be a touch disappointed because it wasn't really the response they wanted last week. But you know, a win is a win. And the Ledgers at least squared against the Eagles. But
Yeah.
I think you know, you. I mean, again, you can't really be too ashamed when a team trying their best and getting a bit of form gets close to you. I just think it's that consistency on North side that will be a bit of a concern. And they've just, you know, as I said, yeah, they're hitting the skids a bit. And it's a bit of a worry as their schedule gets a bit harder for the back end of the season.
It is a little concerning.
Anyway.
Definitely not wrong. Yeah, it's like both teams are very similar in a lot of ways, but they're also very different in a lot of ways. And a lot of that, I think, is just visible in their rebuild. Like obviously North has started to pull ahead this season in terms of where their rebuild is tracking in comparison to the Eagles. They're probably the two most comparative teams in regards to where their rebuilds are at. Then obviously you've got Richmond below them. And then, you know, you'll eventually have like the Bombers, etc., etc. So it is very interesting to see, like the fact that this was as close as it was, despite the fact that North should be, I guess, like should be a lot more capable of scoring a higher score, a higher margin, a higher scoreline against the Eagles.
Yeah.
I guess it shows that like the Eagles have matured a lot this season, but they're just not there yet to surpass the team that is ahead in their rebuild.
Yeah, but like as I said, like we're talking about the Eagles with no backline. You know, a fair slate of injuries versus a pretty healthy North team. Like there's not obviously with son of a gun, Cooper Harvey being out. I think there's another one that's fairly long term. But you know, as I said, this is pretty much their best picks. And yeah, as I said, there's a lot of question marks. But again, we've been negative on North for a fair chunk. And you know, as I said, you don't want to let one game be representative of it. But yeah, as I said, this is sort of reflective of a bit of a mediocre month. As I said, they're pretty much as on par with the Suns.
Cooper Harvey was back this week. Fun fact.
Sorry?
Cooper Harvey was back this week. 14 touches, 4 tackles, 219 meters gained, 6 marks. You know, not you know, not a huge game, but was defensively reliable.
Yeah, honestly, he's never been like the biggest possession getter. But yeah, but you know, as I said, in a couple of weeks, you know, they'll get even more. Jackson Archer.
Jackson Archer's the other one. Yes, the other son of a gun.
Yeah, Archer's the one out for the year.
Yes, correct.
Whereas Harvey, that's what I was like. Oh, he's back. I thought he was. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so pretty much only Powell, and Finn O'Sullivan, pretty much the locks that are out of the team at the moment that they might get back this year. So
yeah,
as I said, yeah, North, they are what they are, but yeah, I think you got to say more about the Eagles. Like again, if the Eagles didn't have 4 wins already, I would say this is a bit disappointing this last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what they should be doing. They should always be competitive at home. Well, not always, but to teams around them, they really got to take teams to the sword, and they've done that for this year. Wins aren't exactly the be all and end all at this point, though. So yeah, just keep on attacking. It's pretty nice viewing, honestly.
Yeah, like they're doing very well. Again, as long as they stick with that midfield core, and hopefully that midfield core stays healthy, it's working out really well for them. On the Emma Rose side of things, so Griffin Logue was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. Charlie Spargo was fined $1,000 for instigating a melee, and the big one, as you had mentioned before, Paul Curtis is suspended for 3 matches, which they are challenging for rough conduct / a dangerous tackle against Hamish Davis, which resulted in a concussion.
And again, it was very disappointing because another, I guess it was sort of playing, wing, sometimes plays off halfback, but yet another sort of defensive-ish player taken out with a concussion. So yeah, yeah, I think that's about all we have to say about this.
Yeah, there isn't a huge amount more to cover from this game. Again, like it's just spoon bowl-ish kind of game, but we know. No, yeah, not really any ladder implications. Again, we're still not going to be looking at a ladder for this week anyway, because again, these are the bye rounds. Every team is kind of inconsistent in the number of games played right now, so it'll still be at least another couple of weeks before we give that a proper look. But we are going to jump over to our next game, where we head over to the Adelaide Oval, where Port Adelaide hosts the Sydney Swans, and with a 3-point margin, the Swans do win out, 14-9-93 to 13-12-90.
Yeah, look, as I said, this game was, it was fun. Like, I cried, but it was fun. As Port continued to be the best worst team in the competition. But, as I said, I do think full strength Sydney just beat us. But with a few injuries, they're looking to rest up a few players. I think they get the bye next week. They were like, okay, we won't go all out. Make sure our list is pretty healthy for the team team coming into the bye. And, Port, they were unclean, but they put on a great contest. Yes was not a premium all night, for both teams as well. Port put a lot of stock into getting dirty meters and restricting Sydney's carry for the most part, and it worked solidly. Like, this was, I don't think it was quite like the Geelong forward half press that they put on this year, but there was definitely a concerted effort to limit some of the players, or players like Jai Sarong took a long time to get going until the match broke out a bit later. Matt Roberts is another one who sort of had their influence. Apart from a late goal, James Rowbottom also had it as, we haven't really talked about it. Rowbottom on the outside. Like, they've been playing that. Like, man, it's interesting.
It is interesting, but it's also very much questionable.
Yeah, well, they can do it because they have so much talent in there. But it's like, man, I'll be wanting a trade if I was Rowbottom. Like, he's one of the more contested players, and they're like, you know what? We'll make you an outside runner. But again, Sydney, they're like second on the ladder. I'm not going to knock them too much.
Correct. Like, there's a reason that they are where they are. Like, let them. They're allowed to experiment a little.
Yeah. It's just a shame because I love him in the inside. He's a grit and grinder. Despite Port kicking themselves out of it, the set shot tally were actually pretty impressive. It was 10-4 Port to 8-2 Sydney in terms of pure set shots. It was really the ground level shots that were very lacking for Port Adelaide. And Whitlock and Marshall really struggled. So it was, again, only really Georgiadis, who, again, had another, I would say, fantastic game. He kicked a couple of goals, 2 goals, 3. One of them probably should have been converted, but then again, he kicked a couple of hard ones. Again, he gave away a pretty costly 50-meter penalty.
Oh, yes.
He's lacking a tiny bit of discipline this year, but as I said, for all the goals he kicked, I can't really complain. Meanwhile, while Sydney didn't break through the lines that often, they were pretty lethal once they hit inside 50. Corno made most of his rat tag, which isn't really a tag. That's why I call it a Sava Radaglia job.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
McDonald took advantage of a raw Ram, Harrison Ram, on his second game. Unfortunately, no longer lossless. as he gets his first loss for the season. Uh, Meanwhile, Chad Warner and Clayton Cleary of all people. Like I know he's been okay in parts, but Caden Cleary is just not someone I associate having clutch disposal. And he had a very good last quarter, as did Chadwick. And, as I said in the last quarter, Port just made a lot of rookie errors with ball in hand. Let another close game fall through its grasp. But, all in all, defensively, even though it was 93 points to Sydney, they're a really good attacking team. And I think most part they did fairly well. It's just that the amount of effort to keep Sydney contained to set them up for a win sort of meant that they came back in the last quarter.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still fairly happy with how Port Adelaide went about it. We saw St Kilda last week, have the exact same situation happen to them, where, as I said, they just weren't able to quite keep up near the end of the match.
I think we saw something very similar last season with Sydney, is that like they would absolutely dominate some of the best teams in the competition, but in the teams that are like, sort of middle of the pack, slightly towards the lower end in some cases, they would like drop down to their sort of level, and like kind of get found out a little bit the same way.
Yeah, I remember that because there would be like they would have a couple of really strong games and then like either start really slowly and then come back, I think it was. And then just like beat really bad teams by maybe a goal or two. But I don't think there's much. Like I said, I think Port played fairly well. Again, it's hard to judge Port because, again, like, obviously, like, I'm not like some of the Port big footy fans. Like, I would rather Port make finals, even if it does cost whatever it does, getting Cochrane. I'd rather them be performing well and all that. But
Yeah.
in terms of like the aims for the year, showing a bit of intent, like again, there's a tiny bit of problems in the midfield. I do think some of it's curbed, and I'm going to talk about it a bit in in terms of Joe Richards. But as that, even that's at least this game after a fair few games in a row, like absolutely skidding. Like there was no point in this game where I thought, Port's midfielders really let themselves down. It's just like Isaac Heaney, like not being able to contain him all game.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Callum Mills having a really solid game. Sometimes went in the inside midfield, sometimes went in the halfback line.
Mm-hmm.
And Chad Warner, after a fairly middling, he got back into it. But it did seem like a lot of hard work from it. And yeah, I think I will get to this point. As I said, there was no collapse on it. However, I do want to, because I don't know, I've been making this comment on a fair few places, and it hasn't really been well received.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with what we're doing with Ollie Wines this year, and I will preface it that way because I don't really blame Ollie for this. I still think we should have traded him last year.
I do agree with you, and I know we've had this discussion before that like I don't know what and granted he probably is being played out of position, out of necessity, really, but I also don't entirely know what exactly he's offering right now.
Yeah, because it's 60% time ground, very low clearance rate on the centre bounce, and it's like, well, if he's going to be an impact player, he's got really poor disposals, and unfortunately, and I'm not going to blame him for this, but, very late, it looked like Port had a clean inside 50 to maybe hit the lead. He muffs a handball, does collect it, and then muffs another handball. And, as I said, if you're going to have, like, an experienced player be late, have those less minutes, you want them to be clean, and that's just never been Ollie Wines. Like, I love him as a bull, but, as I said, it is sort of, and I don't know how much his body's letting him down or whatever, but it's just been very awkward. And, as I said, there is a part that needs to play some form of player, and maybe that's sort of why we didn't trade him, because, again, like, we're not going to put Jack Watkins in and all that sort of thing, but, like, what was the point of bringing Will Brodie in?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're not going to play him. We're not going to commit to Ollie. It just seems like we're not playing as efficiently as we could. And when we're talking about close games, like that one rotation, that one spot in the 23, like, can really matter.
It does
So,
really make a difference. Yeah, you're right. And it, like, I don't know if maybe they kept him out of necessity. But again, that then begs the question again as to why they signed Will Brody in the first place. But or maybe he was kept for like leadership responsibilities. Like maybe he is really like the only sort of veteran midfielder there. Like because you
yeah,
granted you have Butters and Rosie, your captain and co-captain, but they're still quite young. Like
yeah,
they're hot headed. One's not playing for the rest of the season, so that doesn't help either. But like maybe he is really just there for like just a veteran presence because otherwise you're. But
yeah,
if he's not having the type of impact that he's meant to be having, there's no point in having him out there at all.
yeah. As I said, as harsh as it's been, I just like it doesn't quite comprehend to me, but I have I have liked what overall Josh Carr's been doing, and you're gonna get a few teething problem like this. It's always hard to adjust, but
And again,
yeah,
we've
as I
talked
said,
about this. We always not throw caution to the wind, whatever the other one is, the other saying. How we just like we kind of disregard a new coach's first year, essentially.
yeah, I don't disregard. You just like
Like,
only focus on what they're trying to set up, and not overly get concerned about wins and losses. Because again, Melbourne could collapse in this back half, and I'd still think they're a lot better off than where they were. At least trajectory wise, under the end of Summer Goodwin.
yes, yeah,
So
Melbourne were very much like
again,
that.
Anyway, the only other thing I will say about Port's midfield is Sweet. He's becoming an ultimate double-edged sword. He's been great as the lead ruck spot, even in the forward a tiny bit, but he's been terribly undisciplined. Gave away 8 free kicks in this game, including a 50-meter penalty for an unnecessary follow-through bump. It is very frustrating watching Sweet. It's like sometimes I'm like, yeah, we can persist with Sweet for the long-term future, and then other times it's like, man, I hope Vicentini bulks up a bit so we can start playing him instead. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely concerning, especially when like you want him to basically be your leading man, in the
mm,
middle, because he is a great ruckman in terms of the actual ruck craft. He's fantastic.
yeah,
But it's just the fact that he's so undisciplined in contests, and it's very much shifting so much of the momentum if it goes Port's way. Like
mm,
it's again, and that comes under to like Ollie Wines and those with Tambles, like those sorts of moments that shift the momentum can make all of that
yeah.
difference. And if there was one free kick he didn't give away, that could have been that could have been that momentum shift that won Port the game. There's those sorts of moments, and
Yeah.
you just have to be really self-disciplined and just really
Mm.
really consistent your with your performance.
Yeah, and it's a thing that I think, a lot of young players have sort of stepped up a tiny bit for Port. I think Jason Horn-Francis has actually reined in his temper a lot.
Agreed.
But as even though you mentioned him before, like he's a pest, but he does really well with not giving away free kicks. He probably gets more fines than free kicks a game sometimes.
Yeah, that
Um,
tracks a lot more. Let's
so
be
I'd
real.
encourage that, but you know what I mean. It's like at least he's not, fully going over. But yeah, as I said, so it's like it's a very young team. Like again, this is probably like a nearly 30 um age no 30 match experience difference in these two teams. But yeah, as I said, it was good to see Port compete, and I don't think Sydney have too much to worry about. Like a lot of their good players maybe were a bit sporadic. Like Charlie Curnow was still fairly well held, and then he still clicked 3 really clutch goals. One bit of a Joe the Goose, but the 2 others from good marking and good contest work. Logan McDonald again, pulls out a game after not really being involved much this year, coming back from injury. I think it might only be his 3rd game back, to be fair. I can't really remember, but yeah, as I said, so yeah, Sydney. They're missing a few players. They showed their depth tonight. Got the job done, but just got a bit of a scare, really.
Yeah, it's the Port definitely had an opportunity here, to really kind of kind of puts Sydney in their place a little bit, as you know they're second
Yeah.
on the ladder for a reason. So they happen to get jumped, it does actually put that in jeopardy. You know, so credit to Sydney for actually managing to clutch it out. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those weird games at the end of the day.
Yeah, nah, as I said, it was fun though, and like I said, it's been the one plus side. Like I haven't been like I found it a bit painful watching all these close matches and being upset. But like if I knew Port were contending, like I would be much more ropeable on the podcast or whatever. But like as I said, when you like consider where they are, and it's just like, well, I just want Port to be consistent. And even last year, like Port, they got thrashed a fair bit. Like they were non-competing with the top team. So to even though it's another Adelaide Oval loss, like Port have actually, I think they've won away more than they've won at home this year. I think they've only won one game away. Oh, at home, sorry.
That is an interesting little
But
statistic for this season potentially.
yeah. Because again, it was like the Eagles away.
Mm-hmm.
It was Geelong at home, and
Mm-hmm.
then what was the other win? That was a bit of a surprise. Oh, surprise. Oh, they beat Essendon at Marvel, so
Ah,
I
yes.
think that was their 3 wins. I think they only have 3 wins for the season. Maybe it's
Well, they are
4.
bottom
I don't know.
four, so
Yeah,
yeah, something like that.
exactly.
All right. Jumping over now to our Sunday games, as thankfully in that game and the two games following, there were no MRO report. Well, MRO reports for Sunday actually haven't been released yet. But there are no injuries from any of the games, which is fantastic. We'd love to see it.
Yeah,
Especially this one. We're heading over to Hobart, where Richmond hosts the Brisbane Lions. If you're slightly out of the loop on this, Richmond have sold games to Tasmania now that North are selling games to WA. For us, it's to help fund the Punt Road redevelopment, which is I actually went past it yesterday, and it's looking pretty good. I'm the construction is very interesting to look at, and I'm very impressed with how quickly they've been able to actually like get it going. Um, but yeah, before I mention the scorelines, I was very, very happy with what I saw from most of this game. Again, quiet third quarter, which is kind of standard. But 35-point margin. The Lions obviously win the reigning premiers, of course. 17-13, 115 to 12-8, 80.
well, maybe it was a tactical one because again, like Brisbane technically hadn't won at Ninja Stadium before. I
Well,
think
the
was that
last time
last
they
year?
played down there was that draw against North from last year.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, but yeah, as you said, it was a decent effort from the Tigers. But yeah, in the second half, the class of Brisbane was apparent, and it was through Will Ashcroft and Zach Bailey, especially in that third quarter, as you said. Um, and honestly, if it wasn't for Wilmot and Andrews early, and I only watched a tiny bit of the highlights of this, it really felt like the Tigers' hot start could have been like even better. Because they're defensive
The
early
first
defensive
half,
early
to
on.
put it simply, was basically a classic shootout, which is really weird for Tasmania, considering normally it's very blustery, very windy conditions. But it was
Hmm.
surprisingly quite still, going off of like what we've seen out of the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were saying like maybe a 1 or 2 goal breeze at best. But as I said, commentators always say that when you get that wind in mind, it's hard not to overstate it sometimes. But Forza and Alja caused a bit of concern and kept the scoreboard ticking at a healthy rate. It was not two of the names you would expect, but as I said, it was really good. And unfortunately, Lafau sort of a bit quiet, but overall, it was a functioning Richmond forward line. And yeah, as I said, um, also the stoppages were won by Brisbane, but I do think that Richmond were very good in keeping the damage from coming from the centre bounce. Taranto returning was a big thing of this and sort of getting the early win over, I was about to say Shan Neil, Lockie Neal.
Yes.
As I said, the biggest thing, and this is going to be it for Richmond because again, this is just part of their rebuild. They still get absolutely thrashed on the outside.
Yeah, that's
They were
and
just letting Brisbane take kick marks,
that is
and
just
they're going to
how
do
it is
that
right
shit after a
now.
while.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you
And
can't really do too much else. Like, in regards to just how Brisbane's set up around the ground, like around the outside.
hmm,
Sorry, this sidetrack. So I just happened to open Facebook because I'm looking for specific statistics. And Jasper Alga has won the Rising Star for this game. So, fantastic effort from
Yeah,
him.
that's
I'll bring up the proper stats for that
yeah.
in a moment. But what I was looking for was like around the ground stats from some of the players, and I want to specifically call out Dion Prestia. Because I think Meatball had a fantastic game in that midfield. 27 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 7 clearances. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why he's still our best midfielder when he's fit.
Yeah. And the thing is, in terms of like, ball winning as well, Prestia, sorry, Taranto, sort of complimented him well. And even Tyler Sonsi had a few good moments.
22 disposals, 8 score
So as I
involvements,
said,
429 meters gained. Like, solid work from him.
yeah, and it's, as I said, like to take Brisbane and look, I know they've been bad over this last month, but again, they've like been not doing well against good teams. And Richmond, unfortunately, just aren't a good team at the moment. But to be relatively even in terms of like, your ground ball gets, your contested possession, all that sort of stuff. As I said, it's really good. It just shows that Richmond is still trying. And I've never really thought this year that they haven't been trying. They've just been absolutely buggered over with injuries. I don't think that this year is that much different from last year. Some player progressions, you might argue, haven't been as good as you might hope. But then there's also been a few really good youngsters coming up, and you can sort of see the optimism. But yeah, as I said, it is yeah, it's one of those things where, as I said, it was just good. It was just good to see that if Richmond put in effort, they will actually like translate that to contest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's especially from the early Richmond, when they had that really bad period from, I think it was like round 3 to round 10.
Yeah.
Where it's now in these last few games, like they've been putting a bit of effort in the contest and they've been scoring, which is one of the biggest things that you want to see from them. Because again, that's just something that we didn't see all of last year. And
I definitely think
as I said,
for this round specifically, like the bye came at a perfect time.
Oh yeah,
Like,
no, as I said, Richmond just yeah.
I do want to also just briefly touch on mid-season recruit Kai Anand, who played his debut game in this one, finishing with 14 disposals, 6 intercepts, 91% time on ground. And for Jasper Olga, kicked 4 goals, 1 from 10 disposals with 6 marks, and I believe at least 4 or 5 of those were inside 50 as well. Just fantastic work from him around the ground and well deserving the Rising Star.
Yeah. Also, I do want to take a step back. Port Adelaide, Xavier Barnett, I forgot mid-season pickup had a game, and he kicked his first goal. Had a few moments, a bit iffy with some of his disposal, but he was definitely putting effort into the contest, which is what Port needed. Sort of doing that more on the outside, but thought I'd retroactively talk about another mid-season pick.
No, that's fine
Yeah.
because I'm genuinely very glad to see a lot of these mid-season recruits actually being used for what they were signed for. Like the whole point of the mid-season is to bring in talent to fill holes in your system pretty much almost immediately, essentially. Like they're there to serve a purpose, and whether you play them like straight away or a couple of games later, like that is the whole point of being able to top up in the middle of the season.
Yeah, and look, originally I was a bit skeptical on the mid-season draft because I did think like, oh, AFL, it's a very tactical game. I think there should be some reward for keeping your list healthy. And I'm not saying that it's not luck some of the time. But I do think that's like a tactical consideration that you do have to. But one, the season's getting longer. And if we're going to ask more for our players and also restricting the interchanges as well, I do think like the need for the mid-season draft is now almost essential. Like if you took it away, I would say that was a bad decision. And we're also, seeing a lot of positives for it. Still always going to be a bit of pain for some of the lower league sides as they have to adjust. But, at the end of the day, it's people making their debuts in the AFL. And it's absolutely great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like just on this game as a whole, like there's a reason why Zach Bailey is one of the most sought after midfielders in the competition right now.
Yeah.
Again, the work that he did in that, especially in that second half, absolutely elite. Overall, like I think Brisbane again put up a very solid performance. But they were very much spooked in that first half, and I'm very proud of our boys for taking it to them because otherwise, I don't. Guarantee you that the margin would have blown out to a much bigger than 35. If we didn't dig
Yeah.
our heels in and keep fighting.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Also, shout out to Ty Gallup. Again, back in defense and still having a really solid role. I just realized I forgot to mention him when I was talking about Andrews and Gardner. Um, Mainly because I saw his name on the list and was like, oh, he's forward. But no, he's obviously playing as a defender. And probably will for the foreseeable future. Mainly because Logan Morris is so good as well.
Yes,
I don't
that is
really
very
need
true. Like when you have Logan Morris having an pretty much a secondary breakout season, there's not so much you can really do if you're thrown up forward. You don't really want to get in his way when he's performing. But also, it was also very good to see the return of Eric Hipwood, who had come
Yeah, I
back
was about to
from
say
a
that.
partial ACL tear.
Yeah, honestly, I think this is almost a bit of a feel-good game because I don't think Richmond fans will be disappointed. I don't think Brisbane fans will be disappointed. And like, if you watch this contest because you had nothing to do on a Sunday, because I don't think many casuals were booking the time to watch this game, you probably would have got a lot out of it. So, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
all in all, good to see.
100%. All right, let's jump over now to our last game of the round. We are flying through these this week. Where St Kilda and the Giants played over at Marvel, and with an 8-point margin, the Saints do indeed hold on 14-12, 96 to 13-10, 88.
Yeah, and this is like a fairly even contest. It was a very nice game to watch. It was clear in terms of efficiency and ball use. I do think the Saints were the better team in this contest. But that's not to say that GWS didn't have a fair few things go their own way. And one of the biggest things was the Stoch and Clearers game, led by not Callahan, who had a fairly reasonable game anyway, but via Brett Daniels spent the game as a pure inside midfield and racked up 10 clearances, probably best on ground. And it was sort of a fun headish, I would say headish to head matchup with Naz, because obviously it wasn't really a tagging role or anything. Both were just sort of running, doing their own thing before Naz. Oh, sorry, before Naz didn't cop the Windhagger tag. That would be some next level Ross play. But no, obviously Brett Daniels took the Windhagger tag and led to an inside 50 territory win. Oh, sorry, no, the midfield dominance led to an inside 50 territory win to the Giants.
Yes.
This gave Stringer and Cabinet a lot of fresh looks. But for GWS, it was just the other forwards. Never worked into the game. Hogan, I don't think it was quite right. Whether he should play in the VFL. Yeah, VFL.
It is a VFL, correct?
Or, or something, is up to a debate. And Callum Brown just had a shocker. Didn't really do anything all night and missed one of the easier shots that would have got them in front very late. In general play, I think defense was mainly played in the arcs. Transition was very loose for the most part. But I will say that the Saints put a lot more tackling pressure on. And I think that just forced a lot of worse options for the Giants. While the Saints only really had to contend with the stout defense of Taylor Iden and Laverde to sort of mitigate their scoring. And even then, despite his interceptions, Taylor would actually lose his matchup against Cooper Sharman as his creativity sort of took Taylor out of his comfort areas at times. He's been sort of, not bad, but he's definitely not the defender
he's been
once
stretched a little
was.
bit as well. Like it's
Yeah.
I definitely feel like he's been playing a little bit differently since coming back from his injury. Maybe a little bit of concern about redoing it, which is very understandable. Um, but yeah, I definitely feel like he's being stretched position wise, especially in this game. And I think we saw it a little bit last week as well. It's just like he's being pulled. He feels like he probably has to do a little too much for some reason. Even though
Yeah.
his defenders, specifically in like Iden and Ash and Buckley, like are all kind of you know they've all stepped up whilst he's been away. So it is very
Well, that's
interesting
the
to
thing.
see like kind of
Like,
what
yeah.
he's kind of like what he's been thinking about in terms of like how to play.
Yeah, I think just the swap, like as I said, Buckley, he in his, he's been a bit injury affected at times at the point of this season, but
Also
like
true.
for some reason, just an injured Buckley seems a bit better than Sam Taylor, and obviously, missing both. Missing Buckley, this week. As I said, I wouldn't say it's a bad defensive, but like St Kilda are a very hard team to defend. Just because they're so freakish, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they
there's a lot
don't
of
rely
weird chaotic
on set
energy
drops.
around their forward line,
Yeah,
especially.
exactly. But if you focus too much on the ground levels, then you do have those players that just drift forward. Like your Mitch Owens missed a few opportunities, but still presented very well. Obviously, um, well, yeah. Apparently, this match, and I didn't really notice it because I was half watching with Grandad. Yeah, Taru was playing as a forward, and
Oh,
yeah, didn't really get much. Yeah, he didn't have much game time, so that's why I didn't notice him. But yeah.
that's
Um,
very interesting. Just before you continue on, only a couple of minutes ago, we were talking about mid-season recruits. I want to give a shout out to Campbell Lake, for getting
I,
his first win of the season, after being signed via the mid-season draft, only 19 days ago. Or, well, 20 days ago as of recording this.
yeah, as I said, put in a few efforts, but 7 tackles for 70% of game time. That's a tackle every 10% of game time.
There you go.
Wait, no, that's a whatever. You know what I mean.
There's a
Um,
bit of math in there
yeah,
somewhere.
uh, yeah. So, yeah, so it was a very solid tackling effort by the Saints. As well, a bit of a interesting. Tom de Koning again. Sort of been warming up lately. He's had a few more wins in the ruck. Obviously facing Kieran Briggs, who hasn't been in the best form, but I thought he did serviceably well today. Had a lot of hit outs, not too much ground impact, but as I said, considering how well Sydney did in the or Greater Western Sydney did in the what do you call it, clearances,
Yeah.
you got to give him a bit of props. But if we're talking about things that separate these two teams, we do got to talk about Liam Ryan. 14 goals in the last 3 games. He's currently on 22 goals for the season, which is equaling last year. And last year, I think he played 20 games. First time he hit double, two something in a while.
He played most of the last season, I'm pretty sure. Granted,
Yeah,
it was also, an Eagles roster that wasn't exactly performing very well, so he never really got that much of the ball because it was going the other way. But, it's good to see him still really channel that consistency that he was like previously really known for before he started getting hampered with injuries. Um,
yeah.
it's really good to see him back in good form.
Because his yearly best is only 30. And, he, touch wood, barring injuries, he should make that easily. So, like, this is going to be the best Liam Ryan year. And you know what? Like, it's been so cool because again, I think maybe too early on, especially. I mean, he's only played 8 games this season, and but like with Jack Higgins, you've got two creative forwards, playing a bit differently, but trying to create opportunities. But I think with a full license, I think Ryan sort of made the forward line a bit his own.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say
I don't know. I don't think Higgins will take that much to get back into it, but you also got to consider maybe you build more
well,
against Ryan and just be like, okay,
Higgins is
Higgins,
potentially out
play a bit up.
for the rest of the season with the injury that he did week before. But I think
How's
it
the
was before the
seasonal?
bye. So
Yeah,
it's like there's a fair chance that like if given enough space and enough agency, Liam Ryan could very much just take control of that ground level game
yeah,
and like really continue to surprise a couple of teams.
yeah. Just to clarify, Higgins is apparently training with the main group again, so
Oh,
he'll
okay,
be back
that's
in
good.
at least a few weeks.
I knew it was
Um,
like I'm pretty sure it was like a hamstring sort of injury, but I couldn't remember like the severity of it.
yeah. That's fair enough. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, as I said, in terms of just like general from this game, because it's not too much to talk about. It was sort of weird because again, like both these teams were playing their style, and this wasn't too like there wasn't any like interesting point of differences except for obviously Liam Ryan kicking 6 goals, which is fantastic, and Sharman kicking 4. But it's sort of what you would expect, really. maybe Wilkie still struggling in that Saints defense is a bit interesting. I definitely don't think he's near the All Australian form he was last year. But again, I think the Giants, like yeah, they've got a lot of injuries, but they've like had times where they're threatening to come back, but they're just they're an almost team where you could almost see them making a charge for the 8, but it just seems like everything. Sorry, I should say 10. But it just seems like everything just goes against them. Like, they've still got one of probably the third longest injury list. I don't know.
It'd be
I
up there,
haven't
but
compared it to Richmond and Essendon, but they're definitely relatable, which is not great. Um, but it's like you see it, it's like, well, if they get forward line cohesions, they look good. They've got great back half movement. The midfielder is not great, but Clary and Callahan's just doing the heavy bit
mhm.
lifting. But I will say, without Hogan firing, and like I said, I know that they haven't had him before and whatever, but like this game, you definitely consider it a Hogan less ish game. Um, it's really just the third talls because they play very tall heavy, but they just haven't got it right this season. So while Cadman has flourished as that second pillar in that forward line and taken a step up in his responsibility, yeah, as I said, yeah, they just haven't found much cohesion with that three tall forward line. I don't want to make it a sore point because I've mentioned this plenty of times before, but I think this is just another game where it just hasn't quite got them. That's funny to say because they did score well enough, but it felt like they could have got more reward for effort.
Yeah, agreed.
Whereas the Saints look dangerous with less, which is probably the biggest takeaway from this
Well,
game.
the Saints have always kind of just been one of those teams that are like semi no name players, but they make it work. Uh,
Well,
Like
let's
that's
put it this
kind of
way: you would pick the Saints forward line, but they've proven themselves this year.
mm,
Like as I said, they'll like if I okay, I was gonna say I'd pick Port's forward line over the St Kilda. I probably wouldn't have said that, and like
I
Port's
wouldn't pick Port's forward
still
line over
pretending
St Kilda,
like
I'll be honest.
no, I know, but like obviously back in preseason, I guess we were still expecting Max King to play, which changes things. But as I said, there's other teams like probably I'll say even Adelaide. Like St Kilda's been a better offensive team than Adelaide this year, which has been a bit of a surprise. I can't really see. Uh, who else would I say? Probably uh maybe Carlton as well.
Especially over the past month, I would say Carlton.
Gold
Um,
Coast. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just been interesting. Um, yeah, it's been a couple of teams. Obviously, Melbourne's been the other team that's like a bit of a surprise how well they're scoring. So as I said, Melbourne and St Kilda, I think of the two teams that showed that good coaching can make up for a lack of tolls on paper.
yeah,
So as I said, as much as like Ross's year's been fairly scrutinized, like I said, there is a reason why Saints are being more consistent. And again, this is a win against the Giants. They're an in and around team. I don't think it's going to be anything to like write home about. But I do think a lot of the way they've gone about it. Like I do believe Ross when he says there's a step up between St Kilda last year from this year. I don't think they're a real threat. But as I said, with their personnel, like yeah, they in like a couple of years they're setting themselves up for some okay things. I think.
I just want to do a brief shout out and to a player who we've kind of has kind of flown under the radar a little bit because he has been a little inconsistent, and that's Jack McRae. He last season he definitely petered out from a outstanding performance early on to kind of just being very average and getting shut down a lot. I think he stepped up his game a little bit, especially in this game. Finishing 24 disposals, 4 tackles. It's he's become that kind of link up player between the inside and
Yeah.
the outside. 14 handballs and only 10 kicks between those 24 touches. And I think it's definitely worked a lot better in terms of like their flow through that system
Yeah.
because like, you've got Hugo Garcia who's been stepping up a lot more lately. You've got Nads who's always doing a ton of work. You've got Sinclair coming off halfback, Mitch
Oh,
Owens who's been rotating in and out of that midfield, Marcus Windhager who's actually stepped up massively this season. It's a weird midfield core, but when you see it works.
Yeah, no, it's a lot different to what I normally, and I guess I haven't really said this here, where like Saints midfield is pretty competent. It's not that much flaws, and as I said, it did take Garcia and Maxwell stepping up. Windhager's always been good, but probably not this level of consistency. You're right. So, yeah, no, so they've been pretty solid, and yeah, you did want to shout out. But I do think Jack McRae almost reminds me of early Jack McRae at the Bulldogs,
Mm.
where
I was thinking
he was
very
sort of that
similarly.
outside player playing in, like he was he used to go on the wings of the Bulldogs, but when he would go inside, he would just really facilitate players that like to get the ball going. That worked hard, but also didn't mind getting a bit of disposal with space. Which is like one thing that Jack McRae is very good at. Is a very positive handballer, um, which you don't always see, with pure midfielders. So, yeah, I do think, yeah, that praise is deserved.
Yeah, I definitely think that this, especially over the past few weeks, like they have been a lot more consistent. Again, no, we only have to look at last week just to see how close they managed to take it to Sydney. And then like they matched up. They've always matched up fairly well against the Giants. I think both teams have always been very similar. Um, but the fact that like they're able to play such a consistent style now in that midfield core, and it's just mostly about their conversion of forward as to whether they can really succeed against some of these either same level or slightly above uh, teams. And it has been very good to see them actually really trying this season because again, like
Mm.
they've always been so inconsistent. Um, but if we see more of this, I think Saints fans would be pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're a chance to get 10th. Like, maybe even, like, I mean, they're really good. Like, I mean, they're sitting at 10th now. And, like, there's a lot of teams floating around them that are, threatening to nosedive. Um, but yeah, as I said, I think the Saints are probably going to finish up where they are,
Yeah,
in
I
that 10th
I think
spot.
they'd be in that sort of ballpark, like ninth, 10th,
And
11th sort
again,
of area.
I don't think they'll threaten 7th. I don't think many 10th teams will threaten 7th, but you never know. But yeah, as I said, it's going to be interesting just what they get out of this season because again, um, well, I think some people overrated St Kilda's season when they got the recruits in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very rare for a recruit to really have that much of an impact unless it's like a real structural need sort of thing. In fact, I often think it's the opposite. I think there are players that have maybe been playing in a team with like a lot of competition and haven't quite been able to play their role.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're actually able to go to new clubs and have a lot more of immediate impact. Than maybe a player that's used to playing their own role, but then has to adjust in a new system. Um, but yeah, so it is good to see. And look, yeah, Saints recruits are firing pretty well. I think Silvani's definitely lifted from the mediocre-ish start in the season. So yeah, things are going all right for them. And yeah, the Giants are the Giants. They're not bad considering they're injured to buggery. But I just yeah, like the chance for them to come in and have a good season, I think is past.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as they're able to, again, just stay consistent, like that's all you can really ask. And whether that results in wins, obviously that remains to be seen. But just keep that consistency going, and I don't think you'd be too like fans would be too disappointed in like the performance otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, jumping over to the MRO for this game as it had just come through. Finn Callahan was fined $1,000 for striking Marcus Windhager, and Rowan Marshall was fined $1,500 for striking Jesse Hogan. And that
I
pretty
was going to say,
much
no, don't hit your friends.
that pretty much wraps up the week that has gone. So now we look forward to the week ahead, starting with a big Thursday night clash over at Optus
Ooh.
Stadium where Fremantle take on Geelong.
Oh, it's going to be pumping. And look, as I said, this is such a weird one because, again, if a team was going to do it, you feel like it's going to be a Geelong, but, it's at Optus Stadium. fairly reasonable head-to-head record in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's Fremantle who've been so consistent versus Geelong, who have at their best don't really have too many problems, but just seem to halt a tiny bit. But I will say this: Fremantle aren't a high intensity teams, and like we've talked when Geelong struggle, and it's high intensity teams. Um, and as I said, I think it's part of the reason why Geelong were so able to come back against Freo after getting dominated early. So it's going to be interesting because there's a chance that this is just a high scoring event, and in that way it favors Geelong. But I think if Freo are able to control tempo and control the outside, then they'll just get another win. Really, it's really just it's a battle of offense versus defense, basically. And I think that the less scoring there is, the more it favors Fremantle, even if they do look boring at times. Even if, theoretically the game will be much more interesting if both teams just have a little shootout. I do think, it's going to take a bit of effort. It's going to be like that half back line for Fremantle as well, keeping some of that burst off, keeping players like Oliver Dempsey relatable, Max Holmes when he goes forward, keeping him accountable, making sure he doesn't drift forward. So yeah, I, yeah, I'm not sure who I'm going to tip. Again, it might be another wait and see for the
Team
things, but
sheets. Yeah.
I just like the streak. It's just I want to tip Frio until they lose.
I want to
Honestly,
buy into the hype. I really, really do. But
according
the
to my
cats just have so many options of
mm,
being able to disrupt the way Freo kind of go about it. It's really hard to call. Tentatively, I think I'm gonna back Freo. But I'm definitely gonna. I think specifically for this one, I'm
yeah,
gonna wait for the team sheets because I'm very
I
curious.
do think that Geelong is probably their hardest matchup in terms of like how we've seen teams play. Like Sydney will also be hard, but I think that they're actually a bit containable, if that makes sense. Like, if you're smart enough, you can sort of contain Sydney's offense a lot easier than you can Geelong.
Mm.
Like when Geelong's firing, they can get away with you. They're probably the I still think Sydney's the best offensive team in the league. I think Geelong at their best is peak offense, if that makes sense. But they haven't quite had that this year. Uh,
Yeah.
Jeremy Cameron's had a few injuries, and instead they've had Myers and Close come in and out of the side. So, yeah, just close game, should be enjoyable, and what a cracking way to start off the round.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping over now to our Friday night clash up on the Gold Coast where the Suns will host Hawthorn.
Hmm. I mean, no doubt, I found Hawthorn. I found like Gold Coast to be very mediocre, and I've said that through a lot of this year. So I will be giving this game. I will be tipping Hawthorn. That being said, I do think that Gold Coast at home has been fairly reasonable this year.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, there are a few tiny concerns for Hawthorn. One obviously being the midfield battle. We've got a team that is very probably hungry to create a bit more from the midfield. And despite the Hawthorn having a better overall clearancing, they score bugger all points from stoppage. We've mentioned this. They've also had very poor link up between their midfield and their forward line.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gold Coast, they could front half bully the Hawks, and that's really the only way I could see them winning. But everywhere else, I just see a lot more class from Hawthorn, and they should reasonably win this game.
Yeah, I think they've just shown again they've just shown so much more compared to the Suns. Like their backline is still extremely solid. Their front line, whilst has been a bit of a chaotic ball, especially without Gunston up there, is still fairly consistent. And that midfield core, whilst isn't exactly doesn't feel like a superstar midfield. They do get the job done still against decent teams. A lot of that obviously has come down to mostly Newcomb and Nash when he's gone through there.
Yeah.
But with Will Day getting some more consistent game time in now, since coming back from injury, like he's looking really good again. So if they're able to keep that up, and obviously you've got Watson and Ginnivan rotating through there as well to help them out. If they're able to keep that up, they can very easily just dismantle the Gold Coast Suns midfield, which again is still very very inconsistent right now.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, I will give it to Hawthorn. With the form, Geelong, Gold Coast shouldn't really be touching them, but yeah, I mean it's upset. It's like a small earmark for maybe an upset. Um, yeah,
There's
talking about
Yeah, talking about
yeah,
an upset. This one could be very interesting. Our first Saturday clash of the week over at the Adelaide Oval, with the Crows will host the Melbourne Demons.
it's going to be very interesting because I think a lot of people will be tipping Adelaide now after getting a bit burnt by the like probably 2 weeks in a row now. Um, but it's going to be very interesting because again, Melbourne. The biggest question is their offense going to fire against a pretty solid defensive team? And can they do enough defensively to stop Adelaide going forward? Because again, if Melbourne can keep the ball in their forward half, they've definitely got a chance to win, and they're pretty good at doing that. However, their defense has been pretty bad. So as I said, it's about controlling their mids. Not letting their clearances get damaging. I think Melbourne should win the clearance battle, but I think Adelaide might get a few more points from stoppage. And yeah, it's about keeping those tolls accountable because again, I don't think they'll have a huge return. I'm not sure how many of like Tex or Fogarty are slated to come back. I
Mm-hmm.
think Fogarty was a one-match suspension, wasn't it? I think he's
He,
back this week if they want him.
well, I know
Uh,
Tex was a one match suspension, so he'll
oh wait, no, it was Tex, wasn't it?
yeah, Tex was a
Where's Fogarty
suspension.
at? I don't know.
I think Fox
Anyway,
is out with injury, but I
okay.
can't confirm that off the top of my head. But yeah, no. Provided the suspension technically counts for last week, which it does, then Tex should be back. However, yeah, when it comes to like Melbourne, they've been such a surprise over the past month
Yeah.
or so, that I don't actually know if if this really is like a clear cut kind of tip. Like I would very much call this a coin flip at the moment.
I would say it's like I'd say 55 to 60% Adelaide. But yeah, Melbourne also have a pretty decent record against Adelaide in recent history as well. So, even then they've been fairly mediocre. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Again, I think just, this round's got a couple of really solid matchups. So, yeah, as I said, just sit back and enjoy this one, I reckon.
Speaking of very solid matchups, this one is a little bit more average. We're going over now to NG Stadium up in Sydney, of course, where the Giants will host Carlton.
Yes, two teams that like are sort of threatening to start this season, but maybe not.
Yep.
Yeah. So Carlton, they haven't lost under what's his face, Fraser, which is good. Um, GWS probably have the better team on the park, even with all the injuries, and it's an away game. I think is this Fraser's first non-Victorian game as well?
Potentially.
So,
I don't think they get. I don't think they've travelled out of Victoria in the past couple of weeks.
because there's Bulldogs, Geelong, and I think they beat Gold Coast at home, something like that.
It's like
Anyway,
Gold Coast or
um,
Port or some
no,
interstate team.
Essendon,
Oh yeah, it was
Essendon,
Essendon. That's
which
right.
has to be Victoria.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so they're going to be traveling, and it's going to be interesting. Um, yeah, in terms of like matchup again, um, you know, it's hard because like Collins' attack's been a bit more efficient, but you'd think that you know they're not a scoring powerhouse, and I think there's going to be too much play set up from their back half, which Greater Western Sydney will like, and I think this will go down as the first loss for Josh Fraser. But I can't say there's too much between the two teams. And it will be interesting to see if GWS can get their act into gear when it comes to scoring. Because like Carlton defensively have not been bad this year. They've kept teams to reasonable scores. It's just they've been a bit too heavy involved in the contest early on, and we've seen them fade late.
Mm-hmm.
And then B, obviously, while they have improved, there's still limits. Like their ball use isn't the best, even under Josh Fraser. They've still got some things to work out. So, again, a chance for the streak to extend. And it's good to see that they've got an opportunity now and there's optimism behind Carlton. But I just think away, I think it's probably safe to say GWS will get
Yeah,
the
I
win.
think this is a little bit more of a safer bet against for the
Yeah.
Giants. But there's definitely a huge amount of opportunity for Carlton here to continue that streak, and just continue to kind of really surprise the AFL world, considering what the past 2 months have kind of transpired of. But we will now jump over now to our Saturday night clash at the MCG, where Collingwood will host Port Adelaide.
Yeah, two offenses that like to grind to an absolute hold at times. Yeah, Port have not had a good recent history against Collingwood. It feels like every time that we face them, we've been absolutely spanked. Uh, at least the last few times, which isn't great. Losing against Collingwood is never a good feeling. Um, However, Collingwood have just been, yeah, I mean, they've been not bad, but like Port haven't been bad. It's just Collingwood's won a few more games. Um, but as I said, I think the interesting thing will be the midfield battle. I think that's where Port Adelaide have a chance to flex a tiny bit more against Collingwood.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think like some of the contested possession and the ground ball gets where Port historically have been a bad team. They might even have grown to be a bit better than Collingwood now. I can't say so much for ground ball gets, but I know Collingwood are one of the worst teams in terms of that. So yeah, as I said, there's a few positive support, and I'll be tipping them just because again, I tip Sydney. I tip Sydney just because, like, okay, it's a top four versus basically
Yeah,
bottom
okay,
four.
that's
But if I think Port are like,
reasonable
if I think
assessment.
Port, if Port have a 25% chance, like, if I think Port have like 75% chance of losing, I'll still tip them. That's my cutoff. If it's greater than a fourth chance, I'll change my tip.
Fair enough.
And that's just like an arbitrary thing. That's just how I tip. But like honestly, I think it's Collingwood 60 to 65%. But like, as I said, they're two teams that can like this could just be a low scoring prat game.
Yeah, that's kind
Uh,
of the way I'm
and
looking at it.
yeah,
It could very much be a low
yeah.
scoring affair.
But it does, testament because like Port Adelaide's defense has been really good, and last year was really crap. So, uh, I think that should be able to restrict Collingwood a bit more than the last few times where we just haven't been able to stop them from scoring. Um, and look, as I said, I'm not going to say it's good that we don't see Bobby Hill because obviously I love to see him back in the AFL, but he is one of those players that have absolutely spanked us the last few times. So that is probably swings it a bit in Port's favour as well. We don't really have that great small forward matchup, so that
You
yeah,
do, yeah.
that
Port
might be it.
does get away with it scot free in that regard.
Yeah, uh,
Um,
but yeah, that's a
yeah.
problem for
So
Collingwood.
again, like safe tip, probably still Collingwood, but this is also a game that I don't really know, but mostly because both of the teams
Mm,
have not really shown us much. Um, at least in terms of like
yeah,
neutral viewing. But even then, like I know you can see as well as everyone else can that like, there are opportunities for Port here, but there's just not they're
yeah.
not consistent enough with it to really prove that they could be, as threatening as they should be for this win.
Exactly. But like I said, like Collingwood haven't been bad, really. Like it's just they haven't ever looked fully firing
Yeah,
this season.
like it's not that they haven't
Um
been bad;
and
it's just they haven't been at their best at all.
Yeah. Like for where they're at, I think Collingwood and Port are like tracking okay, but yeah, as I said, there it makes it a bit harder to tip. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah,
100%. All right, let's jump over now to our Sunday games, starting off with Richmond and North Melbourne at the MCG. I will be at this game praying for a win. Um, and honestly, I think with what we've shown as of late, I
mm,
definitely think there is an opportunity here for us to get one back against North. But
mm,
again, I still think North are very much further ahead in their rebuild. Obviously, they've been
mm.
playing a lot more consistency, playing really well against like better teams. But again, they've also taken a couple of steps back over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah,
And again, if Paul Curtis is actually out for the next 3 weeks, that does swing us in Richmond's favour. But there's still the issue having to deal with Larky, to deal with Trembath, to deal, and there's
yeah.
Jack
Trade-off
Darling has
has a
been
bit
popping up
that.
again.
Yeah, I
There's
think
definitely some
Richmond
threats.
match-up totals fine, to be honest. Um, so I think that's actually a way where, as I said, if Richmond can restrict, the tall forwards to maybe 3 goals, maybe like average of one each. I don't know how it will be distributed. I imagine Larky would kick a couple. Um, but, so that really gives them a chance because, again, they're like, I think they're just midfield responsible enough. I do think North could probably outmuscle Richmond on the outside. Like, we have seen them be competent against other teams, more so against the struggling teams. But we're seeing Dylan Stevens have a lot better games. Uh, you know, uh, I was about to say Mason Wood, as if he still played for
Mason, what? Sorry.
North. Yeah, no, it's all right. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so it's North should, um, you know, but Richmond's forward line has been better. Like you would think that Richmond
Yeah, well, considering
shouldn't struggle as much
and
with
again,
scoring.
considering North's defense is still their worst
Yeah,
part, there's definitely some opportunities here for young players like Jasper Olga, like Liam Fawcett,
yeah,
and even McKelty, like to be able to kind of take advantage of that
yeah.
inexperienced backline. Granted, they're inexperienced forwards, but they've shown a lot
Mm,
more promise as of late. And I'm definitely there's definitely I think if the weather's good, definitely
yeah,
some strong options there. If we have to play more of a ground
yeah,
ball game, it might be a lot tougher of a contest.
yeah, exactly. So, as I said, it's very interesting because it'll be a close Saturday, even though I don't think any teams playing on Saturday are particularly good at the moment. Richmond and North Melbourne, I think is going to be. I just have a feeling that the way North has played this year, the way that Richmond's played this year, I do think that this will be under 20-point contest.
I
With
think,
Richmond having a chance to win it at some point, I
yeah,
think.
I agree. I very much agree on that. All right, let's jump over now to our last game of the round. Over at Marvel Stadium, where St Kilda will host the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, so Western Bulldogs have had a very good track record against St Kilda over recent history, but yeah, it's so hard to judge because like every time you feel like the Bulldogs are back, they're not quite there. And it's like, well, St Kilda are going well, they deserve a bit of their props, but is this a team where the Western Bulldogs can flex a bit? Because we know that when Bulldogs can get their game going, they can compound a bit. And St Kilda are not a defensive team this year. Like
No,
I won't say bad, but it's not quite what you think of, like even St Kilda of the 2024, 2025. So it's going to be interesting because if it is a shootout, then you would think of favours the Dogs, but like St Kilda are definitely the better team of the two at this current time. Recent form, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's going to rely a lot on like how the bottom players perform. As I said, like both the Dogs and St Kilda are going to be playing players that can have probably very little impact. So if the St Kilda, obviously that's a lot of their forwards, whether Cooper Sharman can continue a bit of form, whether Mitch Owens can hit the scoreboard, and obviously for the Bulldogs, if they choose whoever their tolls are, see if they can take advantage of the fairly undersized St Kilda lineup. They can maybe get their fortunes going. Um, and Saints are also pretty good at defending stoppage as well. So for that reason, I'm going to put it to the Saints. But again, I doubt this game goes 60, above 60 in terms of like head-to-head vibes
Yeah.
matchups.
No,
Like I do think this is somewhere between 50 and 59.
I think so. I think these teams right now are definitely fairly evenly matched, but I think what we've seen from St Kilda as of late outpaces the Dogs. Like the Dogs, their slight inconsistencies. The injuries are starting to catch up with them. Again, Bond's still playing on one leg basically the entire season and is just hanging out for the bye. Um,
Yeah.
like this
Big
team,
swing for the season too.
yeah, that
Like
too.
the,
Like,
the Bulldogs lose, they've got low percentage, and then like all of a sudden the 10's in danger again. St Kilda win. They've actually got a room to room up. They've got reasonable percentage. They're not that far behind the actual top spots, as in like the top 6.
mm-hmm,
I don't think it will happen,
neither.
but they play at home for the rest of the year. Stranger things.
Yeah, stranger things have definitely happened. That's for
Never
sure.
look terrible. Like I could see St Kilda do a run. I don't think it's going to happen, but it starts with this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's very much an opportunity here for St Kilda to really stamp their mark on the competition and kind of open themselves up to a shot at returning to finals after missing out last
Yeah.
season. And the season before
The flip
that.
side of that, whenever you put faith in the Saints, they do tend to screw it up. So
True. That
that might be what makes you flip the
is
switch
exactly
in the
why
last
I'm still very hesitant to tip them this week.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I did tip them week just gone, and I won that. So I don't know. Maybe there's some truth to it. And then just
The
for the,
funny thing is it's like, oh, sorry.
I was just going to
Oh,
mention
I
the
was going to say
buys.
just
That's
quickly.
all. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, I'll go first because it's still on this game. Because yeah, I was actually going to switch to St Kilda, like, because I was like, oh, last night I was like, I just got a feeling the Saints are probably going to be the team. But I think I was edging towards the Saints. I can't remember who I said I was going to tip on the podcast last week. But then I saw like as the favorites. I saw Hogan back, and I was like, oh, I'll trust them. But I don't think it mattered who I tipped initially. I think there would just be a strong urge to flip the tip. Like Saints are always one of those teams
Yeah,
where,
St Kilda,
uh,
the Western Bulldogs right now, GWS, all basically the same team.
yeah, in terms of like, I want to trust them, but I don't.
Yeah,
Like I
exactly
can
right.
see their upside, but I don't want to tip them.
I'm pretty sure we talked about this similarly last year, where they were all basically in the same sort of position. Like they were just
Yeah, the
inconsistent.
Bulldogs were predictable.
Yeah.
Like the Bulldogs would just lose against good teams, which was like very easy to do.
Again, and that's where the whole
Uh,
thing about them maybe being flat track bullies kind of came from, is because they would just lose the better teams
yeah.
and win against everyone else.
Well, last year it was Whereas this year it's like been a lot different because
Yeah,
of injury.
agreed.
Same with the Giants. Like, the Giants just like were so streaky, and when they look good, they never look good, and when they look bad, they were like, hmm. But they're still like near a top 4 spot.
Yeah, exactly right. And then just for the buys for this week, the Brisbane Lions, the Essendon Bombers, the Sydney Swans, and the West Coast Eagles all get their week off. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and coming to hang out with us this week. Are you up to much this week?
Uh, yes, ish. Again, be heading out for most of the weekend, so there'll be a few games that I'll have to miss or touch up on a bit. Otherwise, yeah, just sort of life, organizational stuff. You know, but fairly good stuff. Stuff keeps me busy.
Yeah,
Better
absolutely it
than
does.
I like the time to think about football and all that sort of stuff, but like sometimes I feel like I could be using my brain for other things. Um, it's a very dangerous concept if you've heard what my brain's thought up over times, but yeah. How about you?
I'm not up to a huge amount. Um, I requested that I actually got a day off because I made a realization that I haven't really taken a proper holiday since I started the new job. Like obviously I've had days off here and there. Obviously we had our trip up to Brisbane, that we coincidentally happened to run into each other basically. Um, but like that one I had planned before I'd even started the new job. So I haven't. So I requested to have at least one day off before, like big work stuff actually happens, which is coming up at the end of the month. Um, so they've allowed that to me. So I have Saturday night off / Sunday morning. So I get to have a little bit of a weekend, of like a proper weekend, quote unquote, which is nice. I don't entirely know what I'll use that time for. Um, but otherwise, I'm not really up to much. It'll just be watching the footy, coasting through my week as I normally do. Playing small games. I would say I've recently finished the new James Bond game, 007 First Light. Excellent game.
Yeah.
If you're interested in, if anyone listening to this is interested in gaming, please go check it out. Like genuinely, so good. I think the story is maybe only like 12 to 15 hours long. Like it's not super long of a game, but there's a lot of replayability in it as well, which is really good.
Yeah. Now Rose has been playing that on her streams, and she's been having a lot of fun with it. You know, she's having a fun with the game when she streams both days on the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Rosa is always very busy, but the fact that she's definitely very interested in this game shows how good of a game it is.
Yeah, solid. I had a little look at it and it looked really solid. It is, yeah, I think they said it was developed by the people who made Hitman.
It is.
And you could definitely tell that vibe. Where it's just like very creative, but also very, had that old Bond fun where you're just doing like random stuff, but it's still very serious.
Yeah, exactly right. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming and hanging out with us, and we will see you all next week for episode 111. So until then, take care.